You're listening to the Wayward Atheist Podcast. Hello, everyone. If this is your first time listening, thank you for joining us. This is a podcast where borders collide, where the gloves are off, where filters are removed, where we tell you exactly what we think about the news, politics, and religion. The Wayward Atheist Podcast is dedicated to free thought, reason, and the pursuit of truth. You can follow us on Twitter at Wayward Atheist, on Spreaker, Stitcher, and iTunes. You can email us at waywardatheistpodcast@gmail.com or leave us a comment on our Facebook page. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
This week's episode of The Wayward Atheist has been brought to you by the crafty freethinker, atheist, humanist, and secular jewelry for those who don't like the idea of wearing a torture device around their neck. Find the crafty freethinker on Etsy and Amazon. Links are in the show notes, or simply Google the crafty freethinker as one word. Hello and welcome to the Wayward Atheist Podcast. I'm Dave, aka the Great White North.
I'm Dave, aka Big Black Gay Dave.
And I'm Ed, the Everyday Atheist.
And tonight we are joined by...
I'm Terry Sacrey, and I also go by the Analyzed Atheist online.
And T-Man, obviously.
T-Man on Skype, yeah. The small world of Skype knows me as T-Man.
There you go. And you're coming to us from Newfoundland.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Represent. You don't, neither of you sound like real fucking Newfies, though.
I don't know how to take that, to be quite honest.
I just mean you don't have the accent.
Well, I guess I was raised by teachers, and so I was corrected a lot, and I worked for the feds most of my life. So when you're working with the feds, sometimes you slow it down and you try to talk a little bit clearer.
Yeah. So are you bilingual then?
I'm not bilingual. I could probably get by, but definitely not bilingual, no.
So in that part of the country, to work for the federal government, you don't have to be bilingual.
That's correct.
Okay, well that's good. Right on. Okay, so in the first segment, we'll interview Terry. We'll get to know him, get to know about his group that he started in Newfoundland, and we'll be right back. Okay, so my first question for you, Terry, is have you always been an atheist, or were you raised religious at all?
So I was pretty lucky because my dad was an atheist, but I never actually knew that until I would say probably late high school going into university. My parents raised me to think for myself. My mom was, I would call a kind of a cafeteria Christian. You know, she was in the United Church, and I was Christian in the United Church. And that's, at least in my neck of the woods in Western Newfoundland, it's probably about the most bland flavor of Christianity you could find. So, but yeah, I mean, I think I always, almost, since I can remember when I was young, I can remember Mom coming in and saying the Lord's Prayer with me. Afterwards, I'd stare at the ceiling and be like, I don't feel anything. I feel nothing about that. So, yeah, I guess you could probably say I was almost always, as soon as I was old enough to actually think about it, I was agnostic. And then once I kind of learned what agnostic meant, I was like, no, I'm an atheist. Very quickly kind of made that transition. And it wasn't until I started talking about this openly that my dad was like, it's interesting because he was very vehement about it. Like, Terry, you should never talk about religion and politics. You're not going to make any friends that way. And I always thought that interesting because I'd rather have people who respect me for what who I really am, rather than kind of fake it or just keep it to myself.
But that's kind of like the old guard Canadian style. They, very private, don't talk about your religion, don't talk about politics, don't ask people who they vote for. It's the politeness in the old guard, I think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And the sad part about that is that it kind of presupposes, and my dad actually said this to me a couple times on a couple occasions when we discussed it, was that, it was kind of people can't handle it. And I always said to Dad, all of my friends know that I don't believe, and they can handle it. I mean, some of them can't handle the more tougher conversations, but you just have degrees of closeness with your friends. My closest friends, most of them are Christian or believers of some sort, and like, you know, they know we had those discussions, and it's perfectly fine. But I mean, like that's where you build a good relationship with someone, is where there's honesty and mutual respect. Anyway.
When you were younger and your mother was coming in and saying the Lord's Prayer, did you pretend to feel something in front of your mom?
I can't say I pretended to feel something. I just said it with her, and like I said, it was never something that was a really forced issue. I think she just wanted, I guess, in retrospect, I think she wanted some sort of basic, I guess, knowledge or basic feeling about religion for us. I mean, I was never really forced to go to church. I went mainly on the major holidays or whatever. I might have occasionally gone with mom, gone to a few festivals with the church, that sort of thing, but we were never forced. So I have a sense that, like, my dad was always pretty vocal saying that, like, he never went really. And I always got the feeling like he didn't like the fact that, you know, my mom, very small congregation, so she basically had to carry the whole thing on her shoulders because she cared about, and I also get the sense she cared about the community rather than, you know what I mean, rather than a lot of the religious aspects.
Okay, so you have an atheist father who doesn't think it's right to talk about politics or religion, and you have a quasi-Christian mother who is perfectly willing to teach you Christian prayers and pray with you. Do you wish your father would have stepped in with his worldview with you at a younger age? Like maybe it had been like a 50-50, because it could have gone the other way, right? Like you could have totally bought into Christianity and your dad's worldview wouldn't have been even introduced to you, probably.
You know, I don't know, because I think it's actually and I guess it's a good point, because I'm like, at least one of my sisters, I know I have 3 older sisters, so my oldest sister I know is an atheist, though she wouldn't really necessarily describe herself as one, although I think she is starting to now, and I hope it's because I'm leading by example. My next oldest sister is spiritual. She wouldn't call herself a Christian, definitely not, but she's kind of believes in a higher power. And my youngest sister, apparently, I had no idea until recently, she's kind of agnostic now, but when she was in high school, she was actually quite into Christianity, and it's quite ironic because she ended up, she's gay, and that must have been quite the struggle for her to go through that. So you're absolutely right, it could have gone either way, and who knows, maybe by the time I came along as the youngest of the lot, you know, maybe my mom had evened out a little more. Maybe she was a bit more heavy-handed with my sisters, although I never got that feeling. But anyway, the whole point of this story was to say that I think that my agnosticism and my atheism was really kind of organic, because mom and dad raised all of us to question everything. Like, we were the type of family, when we were sitting around the kitchen table, we'd argue and banter, and like, if someone said something wrong or that was questionable, we would literally stop eating, get up from the table, get an encyclopedia or a dictionary to look it up. So,
but she did get you to recite the Lord's Prayer like it was going to have some kind of action.
Well, she never really talked about any action.
Well, then why would she?
Just a ritual, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, there was no active. I never felt like there was any active indoctrination in the house. At least not for me.
And you gotta
go ahead.
And you gotta realize too that the United Church, especially here in Newfoundland, it's not even Christian light. It's almost agnostic in some respects. It's more tradition than anything else. They don't really. It's like they pray to whom it may concern. You know what I mean? It's not like they don't know if it's male, if God is male or female. So it's more people, I think, in Newfoundland are religious based on tradition and not based on actually examining the belief system.
I'm just saying. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm just questioning it because, like, in my household, it's the exact same scenario that you're talking about. So my wife is quasi-Christian, never goes to church, has some kind of a belief, was raised in the United Church, Presbyterian, and we don't, like, my children, one of them is severely autistic. He doesn't have vocabulary or what's the word I'm looking for? Receptive language skills. But my 4-year-old is completely neurotypical and actually really smart. And when he gets to a certain age, we've decided she'll tell him her worldview, I'll tell him my worldview, and he'll make up his own mind. But in the meantime, waiting for that, if I walked in the room and she was reciting the Lord's Prayer, I think I would probably go fucking ballistic because of the deal that we made that I wouldn't, you know what I mean, tell him my worldview. But in saying that, because it's not really my worldview. Well, it's part of my worldview, but I've been teaching him, about the solar system, evolution, dinosaurs. So I explained those types of things to him. I just, if you ask my 4-year-old what is God, he wouldn't have an answer for you because it's not part of his vocabulary yet.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, actually is that, so, we can teach our kids, and I'd say I'm not a parent, but I guess you can teach them what to think, or you can teach them how to think. And even though I never knew what he thought explicitly about religion, although it was fairly apparent that he didn't take it very seriously, he never outwardly stated, I don't believe in God, or I think it's all bullshit. You know what I mean? I think he felt that it was BS the way my mom had to carry the small congregation basically on her own. But he supported her because it was something, she never forced him into it, but it was something that she cared about. So, I think that they had that mutual respect, for each other. And, they always encouraged us to think for ourselves and to, and I think that just the mere reciting of the Lord's Prayer is the only example I can think of that would even come close to, any kind of indoctrination. And I never even felt, forced. I guess I don't know. It's a bit of a weird thing. I mean, my mom, let's face it, I was a mama's boy. And mom came in and sat next to me. I was going to
We can tell by your monkey pants.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
you get to university. And what did you take in university?
So I did, I wanted to be a pharmacist. So I did basically 2 years of pre-pharmacy. And, unfortunately, after about 3 years of 2 years of trying to get in, I couldn't get in. So I went on to do a biochemistry degree, specializing in human nutrition. And then I finished up, with an advanced diploma in food safety. And that's, where now I currently work, for the feds as a food inspector.
Nice. So how did where did you get the inspiration to create the Newfoundland Atheist group? Well,
so I didn't actually create it, but I don't mind saying I helped breathe some life into it. Okay. Because it was, I guess it was only, I was still living in St. John's at the time, so I'd venture to say it was maybe about 8 years ago, max. I was at the peak of just being so vocal about this stuff. I was kind of at the peak of just being frustrated with with the privilege that religion had in society, and I was, I guess, at my most firebrand. And I think at that time I was starting to become a bit irritating, and probably rightfully so, to everybody in my actual real life. So I started seeking out some communities online so I could have a stronger outlet for it, where there'd be more people who understood that sort of thing. So I went on Facebook and I started searching it out, and I found this little group that had 12 members. And it was Atheists of Newfoundland. And I remember going in there was one active person who was posting, and everyone else was just you might see him once every blue moon. And so I just started going in there and posting articles. And eventually the one guy who was actually posting there, he messaged me and he said, it's nice to have someone else there. And he actually wasn't originally from Newfoundland. It was interesting. He was from Ontario. He had moved to Newfoundland. And, he had just found the group too. He hadn't founded it either. So I don't even know who founded it. It was just there. But me and him actually met up a couple times, and his name was, Kevin Lysett, really, really nice guy, just a really genuine, good, down to earth guy. And, anyways, I was there's no way there's only 12 atheists in all Newfoundland. It's just impossible. It can't be the case. So I started promoting it fairly heavy-handedly, posting it in my Facebook feed, of course, much to most people's chagrin. They didn't want to see that, but slowly but surely, and I actually was like, I went on to like public, this was later on, maybe a couple years later, but I went on to like Kijiji, and I went on to like Newfoundland Classifieds and started advertising the group openly, because I'm like, there's definitely people who are perusing these sites who are atheists and would see it and would definitely, kind of buy in. And so just basically through sharing it that way and whatnot, it just started to grow. And anyway, now we're at almost 200 members. So pretty good for a few years.
Yeah, that's crazy that you went on Kijiji. So for the Americans and the Europeans that are listening to this, Kijiji is like a sell all, buy a car, get a job. It's just an advertising website for kind of like a Craigslist deal.
So, and I was wondering if they were going to get taken down, because I don't think even at the time that I was doing that, if Kijiji had a lot of kind of the community type posts, but yeah, no, I had no issues. Although what's interesting is I did get shot down from some local businesses. I wanted to put it. You guys have ever seen that coffee news that's in some coffee shops in Newfoundland? You've seen it, have you, Edward?
Yeah, I've seen them.
So I actually wrote to the person who publishes that and asked, can I put an ad for my community group? And I think, if I remember correctly, she came back and said, yes, of course. And then when I actually sent her what the group was, then she backed out on it. And she basically said, it's a family publication. And I was like, are you for real? Like, I wasn't like advertising like for porn actors or like, it was unreal to me that, and especially since it's a coffee house publication, you'd think that would be kind of a bit progressive, but I guess not.
Not in Newfoundland.
Yeah.
I found the group, just after I started doing the podcast, our old podcast with Dave, and I said there has to be more than just me, because I thought I was alone, and I found it. David mentioned to me to have a look, see if there's any groups on Facebook, and I went, I don't think there is, but I'll try. And I did a quick search, and I found it. That's how I joined it. So,
well, you know how I found Edward, eh, Terry?
No, not really. No,
an American podcaster. So Edward had no idea that there was other atheists in Newfoundland. I guess he didn't get your bat signal. Anyway, so he had emailed in Atheists on Air and just said his story. And Cash had a way with his words. He doesn't podcast anymore, but he had a way with his words that really fucking inspired you to care about your fellow man. And when he read the email, I thought, I'm going to reach out to this guy. So I messaged Cash and got Ed's info from him. And that's how we're all here.
Awesome.
Have you been able to foster any in-person community within the atheist community in your area, Terry?
Yes, actually, I have. So I mentioned earlier that like I had a little bit of face-to-face kind of initially with when I was still living in the capital of Newfoundland, St. John's, and I added at least one other person, and my wife came along to a meetup. We had a max of 4. Wow, that's a huge amount meeting when I was in St. John's, but actually came out to Corner Brook, and it so happened that one of the guys who was regular in St. John's, he actually ended up moving to Corner Brook some years later. So we always had this base. Me and this guy's name is Brian. Me and Brian would always go. Sometimes it was just the two of us, but we would always show up when we scheduled a meetup. We'd do the event timing on Facebook and whatnot. So, but slowly we had another and another and another. And I mean, it's still sometimes just maybe 3, 4, but we've had groups of maybe 8 to 10. So, I mean, like, I don't know if you call it, like, we meet I guess we're part of the atheist community, but we don't do a lot of organizing or activism that way. It's more like a place for us to come together and just discuss our mutual interests and frustrations with, I guess, the religious privilege in the community and whatnot.
I do notice that out of all of my Facebook friends, and I'm talking like even the big name atheists down south, you are the one that posts the most meetup things. So you've always got some kind of meetup happening in the future that's posts as an invite in my feed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and it's so funny because every time I go travel anywhere, because it's not just Newfoundlanders that are in the group, so it's a little bit misleading to say we have almost 200. There are people from other parts of the world in there who I think just are interested in knowing the atheist communities in different areas. So, if I had to estimate, I'd say probably maybe 75 to 80% of the members are actually Newfoundlanders and living in Newfoundland. But anyway, like when I travel other places, I post in the groups like, is anyone living in this area who want to meet up? And I've dropped in to see people who would maybe never come out for a meetup. They work somewhere in St. John's. I'm in St. John's on work. I'm on a break. I'll walk over to the workplace, and meet them just while they're working. Because like sometimes, it's hard to make that jump from being at a computer keyboard and then actually meeting someone face to face. A lot of people, I think, are nervous about that. So if someone's willing to meet them on neutral ground, just random, just easy, you know what I mean? Like, I think that takes a lot of the pressure off, right? So I actively just try to reach out. I try to be the glue that holds it all together as much as I can.
Just don't wear the monkey pants. You might scare people off.
Hey, people love the monkey pants. You're the only one that hasn't liked them.
I like them. I just like making fun of you more.
Do you find there's much pushback in Corner Brook compared to, like, have you done an event where, like, an Ask an Atheist type of an event in your area? Because I'm thinking about trying to do something like that here, but I'm kind of wondering what the pushback is going to be like.
I'll be honest with you, we haven't done anything of that nature. The people in my life that, like, there's kind of like two extremes. Some people just don't care. Some people are kind of like, why would you tell me that? And then you get other people like, I remember my coworker when I first moved to Corner Brook and kind of came up. I kind of make sure, I actually try to get it as much as I can, steer the conversation and then get that out of the way as soon as I can. So until before someone starts asking me awkward questions, I'd rather just get it out of the way up front. So I remember I told him I was an atheist and he said, doesn't that mean you worship the devil? And I was like, no. I was like, no, that's not what it means at all. It just means I don't worship anything. It just means I don't believe in any kind of supernatural deity or God or whatever. And he was like, oh, okay. But like, I haven't had. So I know I'm taking a long way around to your question, but no, I haven't had anything like that, kind of like a forum where it's been that out, like kind of that forthright and that where I've had that opportunity to have pushback. I mean, generally I have had pushback from individuals kind of saying, kind of similar to stuff like my dad might say, like just like maybe you should dial back a little or, that sort of thing. But I've never had any like really strong animosity. Although I suspect there is a fairly strong, in a lot of communities in Newfoundland and in Corner Brook, there is a fairly strong, Pentecostal and Salvation Army, congregation. So you might get some pushback from that area of the community, I would suspect.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, especially in an area like, say around, Grand Falls, Windsor, that way you'd get a lot of pushback from quote-unquote evangelicals almost.
I don't even know what that means.
What do you mean?
Grand Falls, Windsor.
That's a community in Newfoundland. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And, I'm just teasing you, Ed.
And no, I think if we did something like that, it would be at like a university. The university campus would be an ideal spot to do it. And I think it'd go over good because you can actually promote the Facebook page and probably get a lot more that way. And I think I'm thinking about doing that here pretty soon.
And something else I think that's great. And when I hear you're going to do something like that, I'd love to. I wish I was there. And you're in St. John's area, correct?
I'm in CVS, which is pretty much St. John's.
Yeah. I would love to be there to participate, but I should add that I guess part of the reason maybe I'm not doing like something quite so visible is because my wife works in the public education system, and she does not yet have a permanent job, and the deck here is stacked against people who are not religious. Doesn't matter if you're an atheist or not, but if you're not very religious in an organized way, in certain professions, and I would say the teaching profession is one of them, the deck is stacked against you.
in Newfoundland.
And not just in Newfoundland, but in certain areas. I know that on the West Coast, the school board kind of is almost run by people who have been at the top management type positions. Historically have been members of the church, or at least family members of people. You know what I mean? There's a lot of what you would say maybe questionable practices there, and this is not just a bias thing because my wife doesn't have a permanent position. It's not just that. It's obviously that I hear it from other people, independent sources, that this type of thing is going on, and it's not like deliberate discrimination against atheists. It's more like just nepotism. It's just this in-group tribalistic way that they do their hiring. Mm-hmm. So I try to keep it. I'll always be open. I will not lie. I don't hide anything, but I try to keep it, I guess, at a threshold where I'm not picketing and doing street epistemology, although that looks like so much fun when I see those videos. I'm like, oh, I'd love to fucking get a camera, strap it around my neck, walk down to City Hall and start asking people questions like that. It would look like so much fun.
I just not really an off-topic question, but it's pertaining to the nepotism in the school board. So in federal and provincial government, there's not supposed to be any nepotism. How is the school board getting away with nepotism when it's that's really not allowed? It's
a combination. It's like a perfect storm of factors. It's a combination of, I guess, and I'm not saying that everything they do is corrupt, because that would be like a conspiracy. I'm sure that at least some of what they do is on the up and up. I would never suspect that it was completely rotten, but it's also a combination of the teachers union here, at least on the West Coast, is not very strong. Now, I think it's partially because there is definitely an attitude. I've talked to a lot of teachers. There's definitely an attitude that you keep your mouth shut, or you're going to pay, or you're going to be in trouble. Labeled a shit disturber. All the same sort of bullshit that managers in every government department and every business on the face of this earth perpetuate to keep people down. But it's quite strong. That feeling here is quite strong. Even though I don't really see, they can't, if you have good union representation, then there's no reason to suspect that they can do that to you. They really can't, because if you know your rights and you stand up to it, they'll back off. But it's all dependent on keeping them down and making people believe that they can't stand up for themselves, right?
Yeah.
So how do you go from PC leadership hopeful to member of Rachel Notley's caucus? What does her floor crossing say about the future of the PCs? Joining me now, a new NDP MLA, Sandra Jensen in Edmonton. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, Rosemary.
Okay, so explain this for people, because this is a hard one for people who are cynical to see you vying to be the leader of a party you believed in. We've talked about it before, and now you're a member of the NDP caucus. How do you square those things?
Well, I think the months of harassment certainly were, you can say a lot of it's part and parcel of the thrust and cut of campaigning, but there was a tone to it that was really offensive, very gendered, very misogynistic, very threatening, and really culminated in the weekend where we went to the policy conference. And I went there hoping to talk about policy that I had shaped on my campaign. And when I stood up that Saturday night to talk about policy, it seemed like no one was listening. But the dog whistle politics of the far right were applauded at that policy conference, and so that in itself was disturbing. I was chased down the hallway by anti-abortion protesters. Certainly, there was a good segment of very socially conservative folk there who were trying to put through policy that essentially outed gay kids in school. By the time I left that policy conference, I just felt that this was not my party anymore, and the support for Jason Kenney at that event was pretty substantial. There were a lot of federal conservatives in the room. There was a lot of support from that area. And, and by the end of the weekend, I thought to myself, I don't think this is my fight anymore. The fact is that there is a real push on to unite the right and to take Alberta back to a conservative place that really has no room for progressives, and I had to make my decisions accordingly.
So, but did you not feel that or see that happening before you went to that policy? I mean, did you not recognize your party just all of a sudden, or do you think this is all Jason Kenney's fault? Where is this from? Where is it coming from?
Well, this is definitely a narrative from Kenney and his supporters that was very evident that weekend. And I think leading up to it, when we go out and campaign, we're surrounded by like-minded people who join our team, people who believe in us. And that was a lot of the narrative. And so when I went out to talk to the wonderful progressives in the PC party, I really assumed that they would be able to hold the day. At the end of the day, the direction that Jason Kenney is taking the Progressive Conservative Party is an extremely disturbing one. It has a lot of parallels to what's happening in the U.S. with a rank disregard for women's rights, women's reproductive rights, LGBTQ people, and I think I had to make a decision accordingly. Where is my voice best used going forward in the future?
But why did you then have to go all the way to the NDP? Because I understand you're a progressive, but you're still a conservative. And I don't think anyone would say that the NDP government in Alberta is anything close to representing conservative values. So how could you get all that way over there in a period of, 9 days or something?
Well, certainly I think for those people who know me, and as Jason pointed out on many occasions, that I voted with the government on some very strong social policy. And so I was quite happy with the social policy they were bringing forward. Right. On the fiscal side, I had concerns. And when I sat down with the Premier in a meeting, I talked about those concerns. I talked about things that I felt were important in the policy that I brought forward. She was interested in my policy, interested in having further discussions about it, respectful of my place, and she said her tent was big enough for a fiscal conservative. That was an extremely important message for me, and I think going forward that I have a place to play in the government, a wonderful warm welcome, incredibly supportive colleagues, and an opportunity to talk about the things that are important to me and to people in the province, and I'm being given that opportunity at her table. So the tent in the NDP government was big enough for me. In the PC government, it was definitely not.
Any promise of a cabinet job at some point down the road, or?
There were no promises made except respect, and I'm telling you that was an extremely important message, and it was a very welcome thing to hear, that I have a place at the table, I have respect, and the kind of behavior that has been leveled at me and other female candidates certainly has no place in the NDP caucus. And that's very comforting to me moving forward. Well,
I'll just end on this. How much of this was about the lack of response from your party? I know there was at one point you were hoping for a call from Rick McIver. I don't know if it ever came. Was it also in part the way that nobody sort of came to your defense or stood up for you?
It wasn't a welcoming environment. And, one of the reasons I made the decision I made is because I have work to do, and I don't want to get mired down in the politics of personality. I want to work for the province. I want to move forward and work on some strong pieces of policy that are important to me. And that's the work I want to do. And the politics of personality have completely taken over the party and the caucus, and it is not a welcoming place for women, certainly, in this province right now, and that's been made plainly evident.
And you think your constituents will buy into this?
Well, certainly the reaction's been mixed, but I've gotten a lot of wonderful response from people. The reason, there were only 2 women re-elected in this province in 2015, myself and Rachel Notley. I think that really says something. And the folks that I met at the doors by the thousands when I door knocked in that last election were happy with the work I did, and that work doesn't change going forward.
Okay. Sandra Jensen, thank you for your time. Interesting politics in Alberta as always. Thanks.
Yes.
What a traitorous bitch. You are both a disgrace to Alberta, lying bitches. Now you have 2 blonde bimbos in a party that is clueless. Another useless tit goes NDP. Dead meat. Sandra should stay in the kitchen where she belongs. Fly with the crows and get shot. Dumb broad, a good place for her to be is with the rest of the queers. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to make a simple request of my colleagues. To all of the honorable colleagues in this House, if you are stunned by the words you have heard in the last few days, if you reject the inherent violence behind them, and you know that harassment and abuse, even if it's verbal, even if it's online, and even if it's directed at a political opponent, is poison. Let us be strong and clear in our resolve that no matter where we sit along political lines, we stand together against this. In our words and our actions every day from all sides, if we don't feed it, we must oppose it. Please oppose it. Don't ignore it. Don't look the other way. Don't excuse it. Because our daughters are watching us. They are watching the challenges facing women in politics today. And imagine if we let that poison become normalized, or if our daughters forego the political arena altogether. That scares me. I am so proud to have joined a pragmatic centrist government which has a place for moderate women. Together we will fight for women, we will fight against this language of harassment and violence, and I hope everyone in this House fights it too. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know about the NDP being a centrist government, but I mean, like, the sexism that's fucking bullshit. We don't need American politics in Canada. Keep that shit down south, man.
Yeah, well, one of the things I want to bring up, though, is I do have to take issue with a couple of things she said. First, words aren't violence. Please do not mix the two up. But the sentiment, other than that, the sentiment that was sent to her was horrifying. And, you know, I'm a free speech enthusiast and absolutist, but this kind of crap isn't free speech. Is jargon and it's disgusting misogynistic bullshit. And
okay, but hang on a second, Edward. So words aren't violence, but those are violent words.
Yeah, but you can't misconstrue and say that it is.
No, but there's a reason why there's a definition of threat.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So those are violent. Those are violent words used to threaten somebody.
Yeah, I think it was to silence her more than anything. I think that's exactly what it was. It was, but I don't think that someone was actually committing violence. But a threat to commit violence, yes, is wrong.
Because this is actually quite pertinent. Because within the federal government right now, like, we've had a big revamp of like our definitions of harassment and violence, and now strong language is perceived as violent. However, I think the problem is that when people hear words like that, they automatically throw out any idea of a gradient. There are things that are more violent and less violent. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know, I disagree. I think that words can be violent depending on how they're used in the context and all that kind of thing. And it definitely has to be evaluated on an individual basis. Where the word becomes a problem is when you're going to now tar every use of, say, one word as being violent. Or every, you know what I mean? Like, so as long as we have an open and honest discussion about that, I don't think there's anything wrong with using that word. But then, of course, you know, there's always going to be people who are it's going to become a buzzword, and it's going to be overused, and it's going to become meaningless. But anyway, that's just my point, my 2 cents on that.
Now, for people that don't live in this country, I should explain what an MLA is. It's the member of Legislative Assembly, so it's basically like provincial government. So this woman was conservative PC, so comparatively Republican, but not really Republican, kind of like Republican light. And she crossed the floor to a party that's like further left than the Democrats, kind of like a Bernie Sanders type party, so social democrats. I do have a problem though with elected officials being able to jump parties when they were elected by conservative voters or say NDP voters. And I'm not being dishonest in what I'm saying, because like you never see an NDP jump to conservative or a liberal jump to conservative. It's always to the left that people are jumping. It's either conservative to liberal or liberal to NDP. This is the first time I've ever seen somebody go straight from conservative to NDP. That's a pretty far jump, and her saying it's a centrist party is bullshit pretty much. But I do have a problem with that. I think that that if she has a problem with her party, that riding should have a revote because they voted a conservative MP.
I agree.
Or PM.
Yeah, I agree because
or MPP. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree because the only issue I have with in this specific case though, David, is that she didn't leave because of a friction within the party, as in like the disagreement about policy. This was vitriolic, and if she had stepped down, it almost would be like they had pushed her out. You know what I mean? And so
I agree.
So this is a different scenario, but
that's not the voters' fault.
No, and the principle behind what you say is I do agree with. If you cross the floor, then the seat must automatically come up for an election again.
Yeah, if you're elected, because if you haven't been elected, you can just cross the floor at any time you want. And I would suggest that all the PC conservatives cross the floor to the NDP party. That's just my opinion.
You can also make an argument that the voters voted for her too. I mean, right?
Yeah, but she ran a very physically conservative. So she describes herself as socially progressive, very physically conservative. So physically conservative. So I mean, and that is not the NDP. I mean, Notley is a bit different than the Eastern NDP. She is a bit more pragmatic in that sense, and she's not anti-oil, she's not anti-money or balancing budgets, but they do spend a lot more on social programs in Alberta than any other. Well, they've had a conservative party for the past 44 years, so I mean their social program is not really, or their social network is not really the same as the rest of Canada. I have a friend that married a Canadian woman that lives in Alberta, and he moved to Alberta, and he was like, "Oh, it's great, it's so liberal here," and she's like, "This isn't really Canada, this is Alberta, this is our America, really, it's our Bible Belt. You haven't really seen the rest of the culture yet." But I just for me, I think it's complete bullshit, the way that the men out there are, and I know that fucking fuck you if you're gonna write in and say, "Oh, you're fucking misogyny bullshit," whatever. This is sexist. There's no argument here. The type of insults that were used were against her gender, and the same thing happened to Notley when she was elected, except worse. We're gonna run a pitchfork through you fucking cunt, and it was really, really bad. And I remember saying back then, keep your fucking American politics out of Canada. And again, keep your American politics out of Canada. It's almost like the Tea Party has invaded the PCs in Alberta.
Or it could be that, or it could be the anonymity of the internet, right? Twitter, that is par for Twitter.
But but with Notley, it wasn't just the anonymity. It was leaders in the PC party were brought out onto the floor and made to apologize for fucked up shit that they said.
Yeah, and I got it.
And remember, she walked across the floor because people that were in favor of Kenny, who's running for the leadership, actually threatened and intimidated her. And it wasn't just her that quit the race. There was another woman that was in the race for leadership of the party that does say, yes, in fact, I was intimidated and threatened. I'm not leaving the party. I have no fear. I'm not becoming an NDP. But yes, this did happen. And yes, it's the reason why I dropped out of the race. So it's not just internet fucking Cheeto fingered people, right? It's
and to be honest, when you're on a provincial stage like that, I mean, this is something where people do have to have the right to not be molested, especially when you're in public office and your own fucking party. If the PCs are gone that fucking vitriolic, and now in the election it's going to be nightmare. It's going to be worse than Donald Trump.
You think so, eh?
Yeah, I think so. Canadian politics is changing, and you can feel it. Basically, that the right is moving far, far right, and then you have the Liberals under Trudeau are more right than more right of center than they ever been, and
with their policies.
Yeah, with their policies, and then you have the NDP moving closer and closer to where the old Liberals used to be. So you're seeing a zeitgeist change in the federal politics.
Well, what's interesting too about the Liberals is that they're fiscally, and I guess in terms of policy, you're absolutely right. They're further and further right of center. But in terms of their rhetoric and their on social policy or whatever, they couldn't. They're just as almost as far left as the NDP or further in some cases. Definitely further, right? Like there's definitely a sense that like Trudeau, and as a federal public servant, so I'm quite aware of how they are at the bargaining table. Like the way I don't know if you remember in the news in the election last year, he wrote like a love letter to the public service, like, oh, we're not going to mistreat you like Harper did for 10 years. We're not going to call you liars and cheaters and lazy or anything like that. And, that's true. Like, they haven't said much bad about us, really, since then. But nothing really has changed at the bargaining table. There's no respect. It's all just lip service. And so that's kind of what I feel like is that, and it was the same thing. Like, so many people loved how he got up there and, he appointed 50-50 male-female members. And I thought I didn't have a problem with that, but they loved that he said because it's 2015. And I was like, what? Because it's 2015? Why not say, like, they're all adequately, you know what I mean? Like,
I don't have a problem with it as long as they're the best ones for the job.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And the thing with the federal servants, we did a segment on it before, the veil of silence, the muzzle order that Harper had put on that he promised that he was going to lift. He hasn't fully lifted it. You know that, right?
Yeah, no, not completely. No,
but back to the NDP, or MLAs in general. You guys have a problem with an MLA denouncing, his support for.
No, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's a great thing.
I don't mean a problem in that sense, but I just mean a situation.
Yeah, Steve Kent, local MHA, member of the House of Assembly. He is friends with conservative that's running for the federal Conservative Party. And she's a friend. She helped campaign for him when he was up for re-election, and now he pulled his support for her leadership bid due to the fact that he can't agree with her politics. Her type politics is really moving towards the Donald Trump. We don't want certain people to come to this country. You got to have Canadian values or you don't get in. And that type of mentality, especially in Canada where we're a multicultural country, is not sitting right. And it's leaning towards more, not that she wants to protect Canadians from terrorist organizations. I think it's more of a racial thing. And not just our local MHA pulled out, but there's other MHAs across the country that are pulling away from her.
And this situation with her being threatened and intimidated by the Alberta, I guess it wouldn't be Alberta PCs, it would be federal PCs because she was running for leader of the party. And the fact that citizens have been threatening her or sending her death threats, they've had to put security detail on her, where these aren't the type of politicians that would need security detail.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't really know. I would say that they're just federal government or provincial government employees. They just happen to work at the Parliament buildings.
Yeah, up until recently, I don't think any of our politicians had any type of security whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But now it seems to be more and more adequate that they need it. I mean, it's kind of scary. But, I mean, going back to the initial thrust of this conversation where we're talking about misogyny and what the actual terms that they're using towards her. This is not a quote-unquote SJW type of analysis here. This is something that is point blank and in your face. There are no other words to describe.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say when I said don't send me no bullshit about my misogyny, because it is sexist. There's no getting around that. The insults that they are using are based towards her gender, and they're calling her out on her gender. And there's just no other way to look at it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys, and I think what a lot of people lose sight of, and I think it's people who are either bad actors and they're trying to gloss over the SJW kind of subculture, or they're just not familiar with it. Is that it's not as if anybody who's against it is saying that sexism doesn't exist. It's this hypersensitivity about trigger warnings and microaggressions and all this kind of stuff. And the biggest thing is this grand conspiracy that apparently is the patriarchy and all this kind of stuff, right? Like no one, but like I wouldn't argue that historically white males do dominate certain areas of, you know, profession and whatnot. But to leap to some sort of conspiracy would be, I think, a bit too far.
For sure. But this right here,
absolutely,
this is not a conspiracy. This shit is bullshit, and fucking knock it off.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I was wondering if you guys wanted to discuss the values test aspect of Leitch's policy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, you started off. I was just going to say you started.
Well, I was going to say, like, as a principle, I mean, I think it's every country's right to set up, you know, requirements for how any non-citizen, requirements for non-citizens to meet in order to be allowed into the country. It's, you know, such as like background checks and reference checks and stuff like that. And I think background checks are sort of a black and white factual thing that an immigration agency can check to vet a potential, like a newcomer. And you're saying, you know, do they pass a criminal record check or not? And then you could say, you know, you can come into the country or you can't. Personally, I think the values test is probably a bit of a slippery slope in terms of criteria. Go ahead.
From the information I've gathered from various sources, this value test is more to do with racism than it has to do with the actual vetting process of immigrants coming into the country, and it's more racist. It's more about racism than it is about vetting, and that's all I can say.
It's not just about racism either. It's about Christianity.
Yeah.
Do you line up with Christian, quote unquote, Christian values?
So, I mean, it's just the way that conservative-minded people always smuggle their religion into policy is by calling it values, Canadian values. Like, and like, to me, like, if you want to look at anything, any kind of stable society, the central value to it, if you're going to have it be multicultural, has to be secularism. You know what I mean? And actually, I wrote a post just recently on Facebook talking about multiculturalism versus cultural relativism, and like a lot of times people conflate the two, but I actually think they're both mutually exclusive. I think in order to have a truly functioning multicultural society, you cannot subscribe to cultural relativism, because in order for that to work, each culture has to agree to either discard or at least suppress or apologize for, reinterpret the divisive parts of their ideologies or their cultures, right? Like, otherwise it's not multicultural. It's all like single cultures and little islands going to be fighting each other kind of, in the social environment.
Jerry, in many respects, and this is one of the things I have about, I don't like multiculturalism. I like pluralism, where everybody is equal. And yes, we have our, I'm not saying that we don't have cultures, interacting and learning from each other and being a part of a greater tapestry. Don't get me wrong. I think that's great. What I think about multiculturalism is that it inherently brings in cultural relativism. We see pockets in Vancouver, for instance, where you see that it's totally ethnic based. There are, for lack of a better term, ghettos, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like in a slum or anything. I'm talking about cultural isolations from each other, and you see that in pockets in larger cities, and those start to become communities unto themselves, and the outer cultures they don't mix with, and that is something that we need to get away from. The success of an immigrant into another country is integration, becoming part of that community. And to say that we can keep our culture but be Canadian, that's great to say, but it's more of a pluralistic thing. I don't, when you have people coming to the country, in our country, and say they don't share the same value, and I hate that word because the conservatives use it so much, but the values of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, equal rights. When you have a culture that comes into us and we say, no, we accept that anyway, and we're just going to celebrate that that's a different part of Canada. You really can't, because your first thing you get is conflict, and you get that.
Well, some of the more nefarious ones use our openness and our willingness to accept other cultures against us. Right? They know full well that they can get away with some of the behaviors without being called on it, because they can just say it's my culture, right?
But I think actually, it's become, because of this, to use that now very popular term, this regressive left leanings that we're getting into, and now as a result of that, I think you're seeing a lot of that extreme right kind of come up kind of in the parallel there. I think it's these ideologies which are rising, which are bringing out the cultural relativistic portions or the ugly side of multiculturalism, right? So I mean, I don't want to get into a semantics argument with you, but I think you basically said the exact same thing I just said, just arguing that you think that the idea of multiculturalism cannot be divorced from the idea of cultural relativism. I kind of disagree, because and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm being naive to it, maybe I'm just not recognizing history, but it seems to me like it's been declining in the last 5 to 10 years towards this, and maybe in the 80s and the 90s, maybe it wasn't quite so extreme, you know what I mean? Maybe the multicultural experiment was working a little better, because maybe we had leadership that didn't use divisive rhetoric. I mean, you look at Obama, right? And you look at the way, he's not perfect, but he used speeches and words to bring the whole country together. We're in it together, right? So, even though there's a whole group of people down there, or various groups that disagree with each other, and there's racists and sexists, but there's progressives and everything, but he got the popular voting, the Electoral College in both of those elections. He did that by appealing to everybody's sense that we've got to get it together as a country. You know what I mean? So
I agree.
So I think.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to say that I think that maybe I'm wrong, because you guys, I think, seem very much more savvy on history than me. But it seems like I felt like in the late 80s and in the 90s, and even maybe to some extent in the early 2000s, Canada felt like that multicultural experiment that was working, until these uprisings of the extreme ideological left and right started happening again.
Yeah, I'll just give the worst example of this, Edward, and then you can say what you have to say. So the worst example of multiculturalism in Canada gone awry is actually segregation of cultures. So in Toronto, and this is anybody that wants to Google this afterwards, in Toronto, legit, there are city housing buildings that will only take Muslims. They won't take anybody else. This isn't a bullshit story that I'm making up. I've talked about this in the past. You can Google it if you want, and go right ahead. It's the truth. That is the most extreme example of it. There was a handicapped person that was a non-Muslim that tried to get an apartment in one of these, and he was turned away.
Yeah, and I think that is starting to increase more. And the experiment of multiculturalism, I think it was set up to fail in that it didn't include these core values that we talk about, like core values of.
But hey, to your boy Trudeau, Canada doesn't have a core value.
Yeah, and
until he wants to give $75 million to the CBC, then all of a sudden he's on Facebook talking about Canadian core values. When he was getting elected, he said Canada didn't have a core value. So make up your fucking mind.
Yeah, and that's the problem. The core values, and I don't mean religious values or non-religious values. The core values I'm talking about are basic human rights, basic decency,
yes,
things like freedom of speech, like I said, freedom of
poutine.
Yeah, poutine. No, but
fishing, hunting.
Yeah, but the very, very basics we have to stick by.
Drinking beer.
I would say the Constitution would be the core values. The core values of which is the laws that
our rights.
But it's being eroded daily. We're seeing these things not being enforced. When we have one of the things that doesn't, we talked about it in a couple of shows ago about faith schools, for instance. You're seeing not only cultural but religious communities isolating themselves into pockets and that hurts the entire fabric of the community, because these kids will never interact with another person from another faith, and any culture that goes with that faith will be lost to the greater culture outside. And I think that's where multiculturalism is shutting down. You're seeing faith schools increase, not decrease, and you're seeing this segregation based on faith more than anything. And I agree. I'll take your point, Terry, that the rise of the left was a reaction to the rise in the right in the first place in Canada, and now that and the rise of the left is starting to now go even farther, and so the right is ratcheting it up and going even further, and you're getting this clash of these two sides, and anybody that's in the middle is going to be crushed. And so we need to start thinking about what we're going to do, and I don't think Trudeau is the prime minister to do that.
No, neither do I, especially since he thinks that segregation in a mosque of his MPs and the women in there so that they're not allowed to talk to him and they had to go in a separate door is a great diversity. Like, that's fucking...
Anyone see the irony that he, just this year he apologized for residential schools, but then in the next breath he talks about segregation? That was fucking segregation. That was cultural genocide. Yeah. And I mean, just, and I don't want to put too fine a point on it, Edward, but I think that by definition, I think that, if you define multiculturalism in the context that it's a country that is functioning multiculturally, as in we're all working together, not isolated groups. You know what I mean? So multiculturalism as a functioning, overarching theme for a single culture, there is a way it can work, and that's if it doesn't do what it's currently doing, which I agree with you, it is currently doing, and it's destroying. If we conflate the two, I don't know that it's completely necessary to discard multiculturalism. I'd rather see it framed in a discussion of cultural relativism and postmodernism. That way we don't necessarily have to tear this multiculturalism idea from the identity of Canadians, which I think is a big thing that Canadians do value. And if you're trying to tear that out, then I think that... No,
I think you misunderstood me. I don't think multiculturalism to tear it out of the system. I think what we need to do is call it pluralism, where we have a number of groups of a variety of cultures interchanging with each other and instead of isolating themselves from each other. Multiculturalism, yes, I think in the past may have worked a bit better, but we've seen the fall of multiculturalism in Britain, for instance. It has totally failed, and it's starting to fail here. And I think it's again, it's more about theocracy. I can't say theocracy, but the theocratic sides of the two sides and ideological bents of the two sides of this country banging at each other and forgetting about what's going on with our immigration system.
Okay, so 2 episodes ago, we did a segment on free speech with Jordan Peterson, and I will admit that I got wrapped up in his rah free speech style, and a lot of atheist YouTubers did, and a lot of people that I know, because we didn't really look into what the man actually believed. And I'm sorry to say, but I don't really believe that he's for free speech, and I judge this on his own words. We may have came to the same point in that I don't want the government to police my speech. And it brought me and Jordan Peterson and the atheist community to the same point. But I think we're at the same point for different reasons. And tonight, Edward and I and Terry and David, we're going to build a case against the free speech hero that is Jordan Peterson. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, first clip I'm going to play is the traditional, the importance of free speech. So I'm going to play that first, and then we're going to build our case from there.
Free speech enables us to identify and articulate problems, and to identify potential solutions and to discuss them, and then to reach consensus. And so any constraints on free speech should be put into place with exceptional caution. And free speech isn't just another value like equality or achievement, let's say. It's instead it's the machine by which we negotiate our lives, both individually and collectively. It's the fundamental value of Western society, and I say that not lightly. It's rooted in conceptions that are far outside the political, much deeper than that, and rooted in ideas that honest speech is the fundamental moral obligation of every citizen and every soul, for that matter.
But let's be honest, okay? We've never had free speech in Canada. There's blasphemy laws.
Yeah.
Okay? So,
Before
and he's fully aware of the blasphemy laws.
Oh, of course he is.
Yeah. I've heard him say that he's okay with the government telling you what you can't say. And the reason why he's okay with this is, you guys are going to learn, is that he's a fucking religious ideologue. And I'm not saying this fucking lightly. Like, it goes fucking pretty fucking crazy.
Well, that is the question. I mean, look, most of the time when there are limits put on free speech, the limit is what you can't say. So there are certain things you can't say. So, for example, in Canada, you can't deny the Holocaust, and it's very unreasonable to deny the Holocaust.
Okay, so let's get to the meat of his argument, and I'm going to play you some rather for atheists anyway. This should get your dander up.
Well, I would say a lot of your assumptions are made without thought, and that's partly because a lot of the assumptions that people have are so complicated they can't figure them out. I would also say that you have to believe things. Like, everyone's morality is predicated on faith. Now, there are people who will object to that characterization, but as far as I'm concerned, the psychological data that pertain to that it's established beyond belief. Everyone's morality is predicated on faith. And the reason for that is that first of all, there's two reasons. One is that you can't know everything. And what that means is that at the bottom of your belief structure, something has to bottom out in faith. That takes the place of absolute knowledge. And the second part of it is that moral decisions themselves aren't based on objective descriptions of the world. They're based on something else, like a faith in the right thing to do. It's not a matter of scientific debate, morality.
I got an example.
But if it's called morality.
Yeah, where does that come from?
Well, Stalin and I differed in terms of morality.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, why?
So, you see there, so far we're learning that we should have the same moral structure as Stalin because we're atheists.
But he's contradicting his own claim there, because before in the first clip he was saying that whether or not you believe, you have faith and you believe that, and even if you don't think you believe in it, you believe in it anyways. And then in the next clip he's saying, like, how could you have morality because you don't believe in it? What makes you any different than Stalin? So even in that one right there, he contradicted himself. Or in those two right there, he contradicted himself.
And
so that's
if I could just weigh in here,
yeah.
I'm going to be very generous with him on this. Not that I agree at all. I actually think that there's a chance when he uses the word faith in this context as a psychologist, he just means that he's just asserting the fact that morality is, there is no basis in the physical world. It's actually quite subjective. You know what I mean? So, like, in terms of I'll just jump in
there, Terry. That's not what he's saying, and you'll learn a little later on that it's God. So
okay.
Yeah, no. He asserts.
You're being very nice and extending that olive branch, but let me play this next clip, and he'll tell you how science
is reductionistic. Whenever you measure something extremely accurately, there's a whole bunch of other things you're not measuring. And your assumption is that the knowledge gained by that precision isn't undone by the dismissal of everything else. Well, is that a valid claim? It depends on what your preconditions are for determining validity. Like automobiles get you from point A to point B. You might say, well, that's their fundamental purpose. That's what they were designed to do. But I could say, well, no, it turns out that their fundamental consequence, if not purpose, is the complete transformation of cities, the demolition of the rural communities, and the destruction of the atmosphere. It's like, oh, we left something out. Yeah, you left something out. So you gain precision, but you pay for it with the loss of something else. And then there's the other problem, which is the pragmatic problem, which is truth for what? It's difficult for me to see that it's dangerous, as far as I'm concerned, to consider truth independent of its effect on us. So I think if a truth drives you insane, it's not a truth. There's something wrong with it. That's like a definition. But I think it's a definition that's grounded in Darwinian thinking. And I think what I think about religion is a very Darwinian. I think religion is it's evolved knowledge, and it's knowledge about action. And the world is made out of action, so especially the human world. And so you can't say, well, that's not real. It's like, that's wrong. It's real. It's not something you can easily reduce to causal relationships between the fundamental building blocks of matter. But not only is it real, everyone acts like it's real. And then I would say, well, I don't care what people say about what they think about what's real. I care about how they act, because that actually shows what they really believe. So, and whatever their rational mind is computing and chattering about on the surface, it's like, who cares about that? They're just possessed by ideas. Then they might be defenders of the ideas too, but that doesn't mean they believe them.
Can I just jump in here for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
And again, I mentioned when we weren't recording before, like when I saw him on Dave Rubin, like he's like everything. He's not very eloquent, for one thing. For another thing, he's I feel like he's using all of this mishmash of old philosophy and religion and old bogus psychological theory to just completely prop up his own vague notion of faith and all this kind of stuff. Like, he's not making any good arguments. If anything, he's obfuscating. You know what I mean? Like, he's just trying to. He sounds very confused.
Yeah, and he also says religion is very Darwinistic, and I want you to keep that in your mind while you hear this clip. And I just want you to see if you think that he's not a big contradictory story.
Here's another way of looking at the Darwinian problem, as far as I can tell. So part of the reason that the Darwinians insist that random mutation is the source of continual survival, is that the underlying environment changes, and it changes unpredictably. By its essential nature, it's unpredictable. Thus, if it's unpredictable, only random transformation can keep up with it. A lot of random transformation. Hopefully, the randomness of the environmental change will be matched by the randomness of the genetic change. Okay. So what that means in part is that the environment, so to speak, is finally incomprehensible because you can't predict it. Okay. So that means that a limited creature that's established itself by Darwinian means can't have access to the truth. They can only have access to sufficient truth. And sufficient truth is the truth that allows you to survive and reproduce. And from a Darwinian perspective, there isn't any truth past that. So I don't think Dawkins is a Darwinian. I think he's a Newtonian, because he believes that there is truth. The Darwinians don't believe that. The Darwinians say, no, there's enough truth to keep you alive and have you survive. And that's all. And eventually all that's going to go too, because, 99.5% of all species are extinct.
Well, that's a bit contradictory. He just said that religion was evolution or Darwinistic, and then he says, wait, there's a problem with Darwinism because there is no real truth. So is he saying that religion doesn't have real truth?
I think what he's trying to say, and incorrectly, is that religion has evolved in order to allow humans, which are to understand the truth, which in what he thinks that religion is what's evolved to help us understand the truth that if we were evolved, we can't have access to as evolved creatures. So, like, I agree with you, it is contradictory, but I think that's what he's trying to say. But I honestly am wondering if this man, and I'm not, I know this sounds ad hominem, but I'm wondering if he actually has some sort of personality disorder.
Well, I think he's coming unhinged.
Really
and he's a bit of a conspiracy guy, but you'll see that in a little bit. So slightly before this clip that you're going to play in the talk that he's giving, he did just prior to him, and now he's saying that it's not just rational. He was just saying that it's 100% reason and rationality that drives war and Stalin type of killings. So I just want everybody to know that, and then he goes on to say that it's not just rational.
So he was killing people because, as a rational man, his conclusion that life was so unbearable it should be wiped out. You guys who are in, hang on a sec. You guys who are into rational thinking, forget all the time that rational thinking can go in a variety of directions. It depends on your initial presuppositions. If you believe that life is worth living, which, by the way, under some conditions is highly debatable, you're going to come up with a pretty optimistic conclusion. But if you've looked at life and you think that the suffering of most people is unbearable and that life is evil, which is what Stalin thought, you have no problems whatsoever mobilizing everything you can to kill as many people as you can. And if you don't have any faith in an ultimate authority that says essentially that life is sacred, what's to stop you from doing that?
What's to stop?
Fucking shit.
Yeah, what's to stop us? We're all nihilists now?
Well, what I don't understand is that just to say that life is ultimately not worth living and using that as a justification to kill people, that in and of itself can form the basis of an ideology, right? Like,
yes.
And religion is also another form of ideology. Like, and in some sense he's correct. Yes, given the right presuppositions, but that's the key word, presuppositions. To have presuppositions, you have to have some sort of ideology. You're going to presuppose that life isn't worth living? Well, then maybe now it's rational to kill everybody. You know what I mean? It's through not having presuppositions. It's through answering questions and being honest about, like, I'm a big Sam Harris fan, so, like, I don't know if you guys have read The Moral Landscape. I don't want to go on that tangent, but, like, I'm a firm believer that we can have an honest, objective as possible discussion about what's moral. And, like, in order to do that, you can't have any real strong presuppositions, except that we want to maximize the amount of human well-being. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what's going on? What's going on with this guy here is that he's trying to prove that atheism is bad and that theism is good, and it's like the foundation of society, and that when you don't live in a religious way, this is necessarily what happens. It leads to communism. It leads to tens of millions of murders. He says it in his own words.
Yeah, and he before I get to that, one of the things that he does claim is that there are only two options for the atheist: either nihilism or authoritarianism.
But so he's a believer in hell and he's a believer in God. So he subscribes. He's always going on about. So I know I'm trying to formulate my argument against this guy. So feedback from the listeners would be great. This is the first time we've kind of presented it out to in public. So we're just running through it right now. We haven't written anything down. We're just kind of doing it on the fly this time around, and we're going to do a YouTube video that I know that the alt-right is going to fucking hate and probably come after us. So I want to make my argument airtight. But he is accusing the left, and not just the SJWs, but like the entire left and all of the atheists, of necessarily leading to some tyrannical, authoritarian government and regime. But he subscribes to the ultimate: believe in me or I will punish you in hell forever.
Yeah, he's the ultimate.
So what the fuck kind of bullshit is this? Who the fuck are you trying to kid? You're okay with blasphemy laws. Your own words. I'm okay with the government telling me what I can't say. I'm not okay with the government telling me what to say. Why all of a sudden? Because the lifestyle of the SJW and the non-binary person doesn't fit into your ideology. It doesn't fit into what he deems as a his moral compass, his moral landscape, the Christian values, which he puts higher than everybody else.
I mean, really, it's the height of hypocrisy. You know what I mean? Like, he can't see beyond his own little narrow worldview because he presupposes that Yahweh is real and therefore everything about Christianity is true. So, I mean, like,
not only that, but we're not going to read this blog that he wrote out on here, but so if you've had any kind of trauma in your life at all, you're living outside of the Christian worldview, and your life is now hell on earth. If you're living outside of the Christian worldview, your life is hell on earth. And the only way to get out of hell is through the Christian worldview.
I want you guys to listen to this next clip. I want you to really pay attention to see what you pick out of this quote.
The thing about global scale religions is that they unite many, many millions of people. Now, within that union, there's relative peace. Of course, the problem is that there's different global religions, and then on the borders between those religions, there's still war. Now, people who don't like religious systems point to the battle between religions, but they never really notice that within the religions themselves, millions of people are brought into a big tent, let's say. So, you can't have it both ways. Religion unites and it divides. And if you're going to, pay close attention to the facts, you've got to give due credit to both phenomena.
I do want to...
So,
that's fucking bullshit.
Yeah, did you catch that? Within religions,
more Muslims are killing more Muslims than they are Christians. Christians and Catholics have been killing each other for fucking ever. Don't go sell your fucking shit somewhere else because, I just wish that people would have looked into what this guy actually was before everybody jumped aboard the Jordan Peterson train.
Yeah.
Because I do, like I said, I do believe that we've come to the same place. Like, I don't want the government telling me what to say, and he doesn't want the government telling him that he has to call people that he doesn't like Z or they or them. So we're kind of at the same point, right? He's is under the guise of free speech, but yet he's okay with blasphemy laws because he's a religious man. Is that really you're okay with free speech? Because I don't really think so.
And I really want you to keep that in mind while you go through this next clip, because this is the clip that I really want you to listen to, because I don't know if he's really about free speech.
Look, you've seen Dawkins, you've seen Hitchens, you've seen all these guys that write these books on atheism get massive amounts of media play. So it's not like they're excluded. If anything, they're dominant. So I don't buy that.
Starting about 3 years ago, that's correct.
What's that?
Richard Dawkins' book came out about 3 to 4 years ago.
Yeah, so I'd like, and it's got a perfectly fine, perfectly fine reception. Mm-hmm. I mean, and there's no evidence that he's being oppressed, even though maybe he should be.
What?
Did you catch that?
Maybe he should be right there, and that's the fucking crux of it all. And then I know, maybe you were thinking it was a little bit of hyperbole, but fuck that. That motherfucker is not about free speech. Here's some free speech for you, Jordan Peterson. Fuck you, fuck your religion, and fuck your God.
Yeah.
That's free speech.
I mean, I cannot believe the man has stood up in public saying that he doesn't want to be censored by the government, yet he wants to impose censorship on an atheist because he doesn't agree with it. So I think that his whole argument falls like a deck of cards.
And this is the perfect example of, because a lot of people talk about Trump, and, I think that there is some truth to the fact that Trump got voted in because there are a lot of people who are tired of PC culture, right? But the problem with that is not a good enough reason to vote someone like Trump in, is because what happens is people like Jordan Peterson get propped up by this, right? It's why we need to start talking about the individual merits of different cases. It's not good to say, well, misogyny and sexism don't exist, where everyone's just a crybaby. We need to just talk about the nuanced discussion about where it exists, what it doesn't, what doesn't exist, where does the evidence lead, like we're doing here tonight. You know what I mean? Like, there's not enough of this going on.
Yeah, I agree with you totally.
I would like to have heard him clarify that last. That comment got snuck in. I think the conversation was going pretty. It was a pretty heated conversation, but I'm not sure what he meant by that. Did he mean oppression by government? Did he mean oppression by the public discourse in terms of condemnation? You know what I mean? Like, I was like, okay, what do you mean by that?
When he speaks about oppression in every other aspect, though, David, he's not talking about oppression of public. He's talking about governmental oppression. He's talking about communism, because he's got this thing where he's like there's an army of Marxist fucking he's conflated Marxism and Stalin, and we've coined a new fallacy based on this, and it's called the road to Stalingard fallacy. And that's because like everything is fucking Stalin to this guy. So I am willing to go out on a limb here, David, and say that he means fucking governmental, because every other time he talks about it, he's talking about governmental. Plus, it builds my fucking case, so fuck you. Yeah, no, I do get what you're saying, but he didn't clarify societal. He didn't clarify government. But in all of his other words and actions, it's always about the government imposing.
Yeah, let me just play this clip about Dawkins that he says about Dawkins. You tell me if he meant societal should shut him up, and even if he did say society should shut him up, or oppress him, I think that speaks volume to his worldview. Just bear with me.
People can't do without belief. And so, one of the things, and this is one of the things I think that's really flawed in the thinking of people like Dawkins, is that Dawkins believes that if people abandoned their traditional religious beliefs, including their belief in God, that they would inevitably move to a kind of rational, secular humanism. And I think that's completely absurd. I think people, like Dostoevsky thought, we have very irrational souls. Very powerful, romantic, emotional, highly motivated souls. And the idea that the abandonment of traditional forms of religion is going to lead us to some sort of rational light is like, look at the 20th century. Why would you believe that, even for a second?
What I find so funny is that these apologists, they take this book that was written back, what is it, 2,000 years ago or whatever, and they think that these people were having metaphysical or philosophical breakthroughs, right? They at half the time they didn't have fucking clean water to drink. When do you think that they had opportunities to have philosophical breakthroughs or even intriguing? You're drawing this bullshit from between the lines of this archaic book that really makes no sense. When you judge it on the whole, the only way you can make sense out of it is to make it up. You're literally pulling it out of fucking thin air.
It's funny you should say that, though, because he has a series of lectures on YouTube, and one of them is he talks about Adam and Eve as though they were real fucking people, and that this is
the punishment for birth was just a factor in womanhood.
Yeah, and that because the only way we could get knowledge or meaning in our life was to be sinful, and that was the whole purpose of the Garden of Eden. And I'm like going, dude, you're a fucking psychologist. You did do evolution in fucking school. You should know this shit. This is not out there. This is not new shit. I mean, I don't understand how he can use these ancient myths and stories as some form of, I don't know, basis to make a moral life. I don't see it. I just don't. When you're talking about subjugation of women and fucking the earth, and you're nothing but a piece of shit, but have heart, the world is created for you. I mean, this is a kind of a juxtaposition of tyranny, in my opinion.
Yeah. So that's the basis of my argument that I'm gonna do a video about, is that he actually is the one that subscribes to tyranny. He is actually the one that's not really for free speech. We may come to the same point on that one issue and agree on that one thing, but it's from a different place.
Yeah,
for sure. And David, to your point that you were saying, is it governmental or is it societal? Do you really think that even if it's societal oppressing your speech, that you're really for free speech?
When I talk about free speech, I mean, the true nature, I think, of free speech is the government can't oppress you and throw you in jail or charge you for what you say.
But if your speech is being suppressed by society,
that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think. I mean, oppression is not the way I would think about it.
Okay, but that's what he said, though.
I know, and that's why I need clarification. I'm not sure if he seriously meant that or it was just some kind of facetious argument. I'm not sure, but obviously,
so
when an idea is disagreed with, the result, you don't oppress somebody. You disagree with them, and you say why they're incorrect. So that's what I assume that's what he meant. But if he thinks Richard Dawkins is wrong, people would disagree with him. I don't know why he used the word oppressed. So that's
so he's very careful in using the right words when he's talking about himself being oppressed. Yeah, so like he's very careful in that sense. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that he would be perfectly happy with Richard Dawkins being oppressed, and that the blasphemy laws stay in place, and that the only reason why he's for free speech in this one instance, because he didn't bring it up with the hate speech laws that we have in Canada, and he didn't bring it up for the blasphemy laws, it's because it fits inside his ideology to not like these people.
Yeah, let's really get to his motive, his modus operandi. This is he does what he calls back of the envelope calculations, and talks about how Marxist theory is destroying the fabric of society. Let's see what he says about that.
And they're not a tiny group. Don't be thinking that. I did some mathematical calculations a while back. They're back of the envelope sort of things, but I figure that the women's studies and gender studies departments alone, so the more radical end of the university, has produced between 300,000 and 3 million fully trained social justice warrior political activists who know exactly what they're doing, and that's like 1% of the North American population. That's not a tiny minority. That's the really committed ones. There's at least, I would say, 5 times that number that are perhaps not quite so radical nor so well trained.
1,000 to 3 million? Like, I bet you did your fucking cracker jackbox fucking.
That's a full order of magnitude. So yeah. Back of an envelope is probably, I don't think he wrote that down. I think it's more like off the top of his head.
Cracker Jack.
I think that's more than pulled it out of his ass. But
he speaks to the left like Sam Harris speaks to fucking Islam.
So like, did you guys see him on Dave Rubin? Are you guys familiar with the Rubin Report?
Yeah, we're familiar. This is gonna be awful. I find Dave Rubin, and I know I have an annoying Canadian accent, but I can't stand Dave Rubin's voice, man.
Okay, yeah, but so he actually said to Dave Rubin, because Dave says, like, and I agree with Dave when he says that I think that the vast majority of SJWs and the people over there on that side of that far left, I think most of them do have the best intentions. They think they're doing something good for society, right? Like, do all of them? No. I think that some of them really do have bad intentions. They are malicious, but I think they're in the minority, right? And not to mention the fact that the SJWs are already a minority, I think, by and large, but they're growing, right? Because they're basically shutting people up and trying to brainwash, and you know, I think that to some degree they are coming out of a lot of these gender studies type stuff, you know what I mean? All like these types of degrees. I think there's some truth to that, but I really don't. I guess maybe it's just because I'm an optimist, but I really believe in that people are trying to do what's trying to make the world better in most cases, even religious people, even though they're misguided and brainwashed or whatever. But like, he actually believes that these degree programs are like programming people to like run a conspiracy, and they're all like malicious. I'm like,
they're all Marxist, Stalinist, because he conflates the two. Socialism, Marxists, and Stalinists are all the same to him.
And you've got to be, at what level of paranoia are you at to really believe that? Like, you're off the charts.
And I would just I would step in and just clarify that there is a difference between a social justice activist and a social justice warrior. There's a complete difference in the definition. One isn't really an activist and just kind of is loud And we've seen that in his free speech video where they attacked the female reporter. I would call that an SJW and somebody that is actually doing something for activism, just a social activist. But yeah, he has a complete disdain for atheists, for anything left-wing at all. It's necessarily going to be communism. And like I said, like I coined a new fallacy. It's the road to Stalingrad fallacy, because it's kind of like God wins, but it's Stalin. So yeah, fuck him.
Yeah, one of the things I really wanted to point out in what I've gathered from what you just said, Terry, is, and what Dave said, was that people are genuinely trying to do something that is positive. I think that's the goal. And everybody here, I don't think anybody in this panel right now would say anything that wouldn't throw their bodies into preventing someone from getting hurt, or to be fired from a job based on their gender or anything like that. I think we would all step up to the plate and fight against that.
And I take that one further, and if I had a friend or had an acquaintance who I met and they had hopefully the ability to tell me that I prefer to be referred to this. I'm not going to get upset if you fuck up or whatever, but if you could just try, I'd appreciate that. And there's not going to be any animosity. I would say absolutely, I'll try. I'm probably going to forget, but I'll try. You know what I mean? Like, this is just between us, but I don't, I agree with you guys. I don't want my country, my government, now telling me that if I don't do this and wording their laws so vaguely that the wrong person gets in power, and all of a sudden, you could have criminal litigation against you.
So hang on one second. I just want to clarify that. So what's going on there with the charges? It's not really criminal per se. Like, you're not going to end up in jail. I know he keeps saying that, but it's actually just a fine. You know what you do end up in jail for, though, in Canada, or you can end up in jail for a maximum of 2 years? Blasphemy. The law that he's okay with. Yeah. And that's why I say fuck your religion.
Yeah, and I read actually went through the criminal code the other day when after you guys participated in that bit of a discussion on my Facebook wall when I posted that article, and I went and actually read it, and the actual changes they don't read to be that extreme, right? I actually don't object to the additions to the charter. But I object to the criminal code, but only insofar as none of these. There should be no policing of free speech in this, or of your speech in this way. Whether it's for blasphemy, whether it's for all of those provisions, or that provision should be removed in my view, right? But I say leave it. I say leave it in the charter. I got no problem with adding a gender identity and gender expression in the charter.
I do have. I find it. I'm going to try to phrase this properly. I do find it difficult to say that it needs to go into the charter, because we already have in our charter that you can't discriminate based on gender.
It doesn't say that. It says sex, and they are different.
No, but it does say gender. It does say it doesn't say gender identity or gender expression. Sex, gender, and I'm almost positive the change that it was going to make is for gender identity and gender expression. The gender expression and gender identity are subsections of gender. I don't understand why they would have to. It's more of a semantics thing for me. It's not like I would oppose. I just think that it's already there to protect people based on gender. I don't think it's necessary to increase it by saying.
Go ahead, Terry.
I'm not trying to be a stickler here, but so I'm looking under subsection 15.1 under equality rights.
Yep.
Equality before and under law and equal protection and benefit of law. Now, I'm just looking. Okay. So it says every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to equal protection, equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability, Full stop.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would argue that sex is gender in that term. I would argue that.
Yeah, I would agree too.
I would argue that is what they mean when they say sex. And I would also argue that at the very beginning it says everybody, right?
So the key with the law interpreting what's covered is the case history, right? You have to go back and see what, like, sexual, like right now, if someone to bring a charter rights case against, discrimination against LGBT people, it's not so much that it's spelt out in the charter. It's just been interpreted as including that group within the charter. So when they decide to expand language within the Constitution, I think it's just a matter of being more precise to dispel any kind of ambiguity. So that's, what you were saying, Ed, in terms of them not needing to expand sort of gender to gender identity and gender expression. It's just about being more precise in language.
Yeah, I just, like I said, I really don't have a problem with it. It's the implementation of the new hate speech crimes that really gets my goat.
It's the harassment, actually. It's specifically the wording of harassment that is the problem, because then it's subjective as to what harassment is. I may find something that isn't harassment. Somebody else may find it as such. You get the wrong justice in the proceedings, and you come up and that justice deems that as harassment. The stuff that I am for in Bill C-16, because we forget to mention a lot of this, and everybody forgets to mention a lot of this, and I didn't mention this last time either, is the fact that, it wasn't written in the code that genocide wasn't cool against trans people before. It is now, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. And it's also written in for human being, for humanhood, right? So like they weren't necessary, like gender was written in, but trans, like specific wording of trans wasn't written, and it will be now. So there are parts of it that are good, and I think should be passed, right?
And I think that David's point is really a good point. The definitions in the context of the words based on case history and jurisprudence, whatever you want to call it, maybe that's the wrong way to use that word, but it doesn't matter whether you believe sex and gender are different. What matters is that our language has changed so that we do understand it, whether you believe it's actually different or not. Like, the way that we understand it now is that sex refers to our biological sex. Gender can be, we really don't know. It's not defined very well, but we do know that people can be and are discriminated against because of the way they identify. So regardless, because you could say, a lot of people say, oh, well, just like they used to say about homosexuals, they say now, like, well, they're really mentally ill people who have gender dysphoria or whatever it is, right? So, I mean, like, it does, but to me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the reasons are. These people exist, and it's wrong to discriminate against them for that. And because of the language we use has evolved, it's necessary. Well, necessary. Maybe you could argue that, but I think that as long as the criminal code part are taken out for this and for blasphemy and for all those other things, I think it's relatively innocuous.
Yeah, I think the main thrust of my opposition to this entire bill is not that I don't want gender expression and gender identity in the Constitution or amended into it, even if it's under the rubric of just gender, period. But what my opposition is again to the interpretation that I could become a criminal for misgendering somebody, for not using words that don't come naturally to me. And it's not that I wouldn't do it for an individual case. Like if I knew somebody and they requested it, that's different. That's just being polite and not being an asshole. But to be forced to, be mandated to by law, that's where I have a problem with. Because
totally agree.
Free speech to me is sacrosanct. It's more sacred, and I hate using that word because the religions have co-opted it. But it is something that is the fundamental of any civilization that is a free society. We have.
Sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why it's the First Amendment in the Constitution of the United States. I say this all the time. There's a reason why. because it disarms people. It allows people to get grievances out and be able to take politicians to task. It allows us to be free and open to share ideas, to come across ideas that are harmful and hurtful, that we can go back and learn from and be able to come back with better arguments to take those down. When you start stifling people from speaking is when you grow resentment, when you grow hatred. And I really fear if these hate speech provisions stay within in the criminal code of Canada, that this people will have to abide by it because it's law. But the resentment will boil up and boil up and boil up. It will not garner acceptance. It will become a boiling point by which some fascist, and I'll say fascist, will use that as an impotence to get power. And I think it'll come up in a violent way. Words are used so that we don't have to use violence. And that's why this First Amendment of the United States is free speech, freedom of expression. It's because of that we don't have, Americans don't have to go to the Second Amendment to get their freedom by force. And I think that is the reason why those two are in the order of that.
Real quick, I just want to say that if he tomorrow came out and said that he was against blasphemy laws and he was against the hate speech laws and he was against the government telling him what not to say, just not what to say, then I wouldn't go after him. But until he does that, I'm coming.
Do you remember the movie Pinocchio?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, do you remember at the beginning, Geppetto is hoping that Pinocchio will become a real individual, right? He doesn't want him to be a marionette. He doesn't want to have to pull his strings. So the entire movie is about this puppet who's learning how to be individual and not having someone pull his strings. Well, when Geppetto first formulates his intent, he wishes on a star. And what that means is there's a very deep meaning to that, a very deep symbolic meaning. It means he lifts his eyes above the earth and picks the most transcendent value that he can speak to, which is his paternal wishes for the best possible outcome for his son. And it's that wish that catalyzes Pinocchio's individual development. And so that idea that there's a king is actually an accurate idea. The king is the proper king of the motivational and emotional systems.
You guys spends too much time with fucking cartoons. I swear to Jesus. But the problem I have with, and the reason why I brought in this clip, it just really encapsulates the religious thinking that he has. That we refer everything upward. That we can't settle anything down here. And I think that's the definition of being an abject slave. We have the dear leader that we have to worship in the sky. He's the only one that can solve our problems. The rest of us can just fucking die. And I think that, to me, the ideology behind why he's doing this today is because he doesn't agree with the lifestyle. He doesn't agree with having to bend anymore.
His ideology.
Yeah, his ideology doesn't want to bend.
Yeah.
So the ironic thing about the blasphemy law or the criminal code clauses surrounding hate speech and religion is that there's actually a defense. Did you guys read the defenses section of that? Where basically it says that if you're espousing a religious opinion, and it's clearly like a religious opinion, I'm paraphrasing now, obviously. It says that can be a defense of your hate speech, right? So, isn't it ironic that you simultaneously say no hate speech, but then give a protection to
for someone to use their religion to bash gays?
Exactly. So you're simultaneously, it's like a hypocrisy built right in there. You're saying no hate speech, but then you're also defending some of the worst hate speech comes from religions. It absolutely does. What could be more hateful than saying that being gay means that you should be tortured for all of eternity? Even though hell.
This is a man that says that if you don't live the Christian lifestyle, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
So
Jordan Peterson.
I have a quick question, and I this is to do with hate speech. Do you literally believe, that anything that comes out of my mouth, barring that I'm uttering threats against somebody, okay, that anything coming out of my mouth, whether it's Holocaust denial, racist epitaph, or homophobic slur, should be criminalized? Is that something that you think that is something that should be criminalized?
I'll be honest with you. I for a long time, I kind of thought that the hate speech laws, there might be extreme cases, but based on what I've heard in the last, say, 6 months, 8 months, arguments against it, I actually think that I'm more of a I think I am a purist like you are, Edward. I do not think there is any circumstances under which words alone that are not direct threats, right? Like the only thing I could think of would be someone in a huge position of power getting up on a podium and saying to a big group of people, go out and kill them. Go do it now, right? Like that someone in that level of position of power, right? Them saying that is so irresponsible and so potentially destructive and is violent in a very literal way. That is the only example that I can hear of. But like, if I'm just on the street and I point at a random stranger and say to him, hey, you go kill that guy, and he actually goes and kills that guy, I don't want to be put in jail for that, because that guy's obviously a lunatic.
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, there is a decision factor.
It has to be context. There has to be context.
But I think also, and why, one of the reasons why, and one of the things I confront with the SJW circle, is they want to ban speech that hurts their feelings. Mm-hmm. And I want to get across to them that it's not that, even if speech hurts your feelings, it's important for you to hear that speech, because there are vital things that you learn from that speech. Maybe that it may be that you'll learn how to combat that kind of speech in the future.
Not just that, but their lifestyle is because of free speech. If there wasn't free speech and freedom of identity and freedom of choice fought for a long time ago, they wouldn't have the ability to lead the lifestyle that they're leading now. That's my problem with it.
Well, I agree, and I just want to put it in a nutshell for a second. Like, people talk about banning Holocaust deniers. Okay, we were all told through school, and that the Holocaust happened. We know only by what people have told us. No direct observation. We have no, we have done no research for ourselves. So when someone is a denier of the Holocaust, what it should engage in your brain is, well, how do I know that the Holocaust took place? What evidence could I produce to prove to him or her or whatever that this happened? And if you don't hear those opposite opinions, you cannot formulate your own conclusions. And those things are vitally important for you to understand. Like, that's why freedom of expression is vital to a cohesive society, so that the right can argue with the left and the left can argue with the right, and in the middle we get the best solutions for a problem. You need those two competing motives to actually work together to make a country like ours run, and that's why we have an oppositional parliament.
I'm listening to you talk right now, and I'm trying to think of how a person that literally thinks the left wing is out to destroy the planet, and that the only way you can figure things out is through deep religious knowledge, would be willing to even consider working. He complains about the SJWs, but I don't see him out there fucking trying to work any better. What did he do? He said he's not going to call them they, and he did a couple speeches, and I'll admit, he sounds pretty good when he's giving a speech, and I got all rah about the free speech, but as soon as you look into it, it falls apart pretty fucking quick. It's really disappointing, but yeah.
I mean, no one expects anyone to be perfect philosophically all the time. I mean,
God damn, that's bad, man.
Yes. It's really bad. I mean, like, it's a very egregious case of hypocrisy on his part, right? To say, oh, well, you know, he's basically saying, I don't like this flavor of fascism or authoritarianism, you need to subscribe to mine, rather than being, principled about it and say all versions of authoritarianism are wrong. You know what I mean? It doesn't.
And his is the ultimate of authoritarianism. Yeah. It's like the ultimate. I know what you're thinking. I'm watching you when you're sleeping. Don't fucking jerk off. You're going to burn in hell. You know what I mean? It's like he subscribes to the ultimate. He's like the Celeste, as Christopher Hitchens, who I don't know how you're going to diss Hitch, but he did. Anyways, the celestial North Korea. That's what he subscribes to. He hates communism, and he subscribes to the celestial North Korea.
When he's talking about, only I can't remember what was the audio clip said, that only deep religious thought can help you understand
religious language.
So what I get a big kick out of is that, like, you know, he's got to be so isolated. Like, I just listened to a podcast today, Sam Harris, and he was talking to a lead computer scientist about AI, the potential dangers of AI. And you're hearing these two intellectuals talk. And these are two people who are thinking so deeply about the potential dangers of AI. And, like, you can tell that these guys have thought long and hard about that. And this is a scientific problem, right? And now he's trying to say that some philosophy based on an age-old book and a whole bunch of, like, you couldn't even conceive of it being true in a scientific sense, right? This is deeper than thinking about, you know, this other moral problem or philosophical problem. Like, I can't even wrap my mind around it.
Yeah. One of the things that he does, and I didn't take the clip from the Dave Callum show, but Brian Callum show. He made a statement that just floored me. He is an open resistance against secularism.
Yes.
Really?
Yes. So, to me, any notion that he has about freedom of speech goes out the window, because I'm defending his right to speech and as well as mine. I don't care if the religious guy is trying to say that I'm going to hell for the rest of his life, or rest of my life, or a person getting an abortion is going to hell or whatever. And if someone tried to block them, I'd fight for their right to say that in public with just as much fervor as I have fighting for my freedom of speech to deal with, to go against what I believe is wrong. And the fact that he's openly says that secularism leads to the rivers of blood of the 20th century is absolutely beyond.
Oh, and religion doesn't cause wars, by the way.
No,
it's not that simple.
No, well, what he's saying is that once you're in a cohesive group of religious thinkers, that there will be no war. Well, that's obviously bullshit, as you point out.
No, but I've heard videos of him when somebody has said that it's not atheism that causes war, it's religions, and he said, oh, it's not that simple, it's economic and it's religion, but you can't really put it on the religion. It's more like, does these people really want what I have? He's a fucking ass anyways.
My final thought on it is that as skeptics, we're getting duped.
Yes.
Because people like me and like you, David, and like you, Terry, and David and Dave, we are for free speech. We want to be for free speech. We want people to be able to say what they want, and not just what they want, but what they feel they need to without repercussions from the government, from any government agency. And the fact that I feel like I was duped again, almost like a religious person duped me again. And I'm kind of pissed off about it right now.
And I think that this illustrates, too, though, this big problem, and I think it's been illustrated by the recent American election, is that we've got a big problem with media. And the way that news stories are presented. And, like, I used to be someone, like, I take a lot of pride in considering myself a skeptic. But I did honestly get most of my news from Facebook, and I read those articles, and I kind of took it on blind faith that what I was reposting was true. And now since the election, and since so much of this, not just from, I always kind of scoffed at the right-wing kind of stories or whatever, like, oh, that's obviously false. But now whenever I read something, if I vehemently disagree, I'm like, I better look that up. If I vehemently agree, I think I better look that up and try to vet that. And what I'm finding is that if I actually feel very strongly about the headline, there's a very good chance that there's only it's either false or there's only a very small grain of truth in that. And like the way media is done these days, I'm telling you, people need to, like, it's horrible. I mean, there's no credibility in, especially online journalism. I find it appalling.
Yeah, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
I just want to speak to that just briefly because it's been on the news a lot lately about like fake news sites and all that. And then, the Facebook trying to manage its algorithm so fake news sites are diminished. Facebook can do that. I think what it is, it's about critical thinking, is right. It's the employing, like giving people the skills to critically think, to look up and secondary, tertiary sources to the news articles. And because most people might be lazy, and not do that, you have these aggregator sites like Facebook and Google and all that, that have kind of a lot of power with their algorithms, and people are just not going to look for those sources, and they're just going to believe what they see. And that's a problem. That's a fundamental problem, I think, in our society. The thought bubble
and I think that's exactly what happened with me. As I bought the Kool-Aid, I actually didn't do the research I should have done, which I normally would have done, because he hit all the right notes with what I thought, and then I feel real stupid right now. So
yeah, so he got me too, but we moved past that, and we're on to the next point. I still don't want my government forcing him to use the pronoun. Even after all this, I still I would find it wrong if that's what's going on. But if there ever comes a day where he refuses to teach somebody or fucking, oppresses somebody else's free speech because of his religion, I'm there. I think he's dishonest. I think we've pretty much proven that he's at the very least a hypocrite tonight. I don't know about you guys. It's his own words. You can go on YouTube and just do the research that we did. Ed and I spent a few hours going through his videos on what he teaches his students, what he says about free speech, what he says about communism, what he says about atheism, and what he says about religion. I think it's pretty rock solid. It's still a work in progress, this argument that we're formulating, but yeah, he's a fucking lying hypocrite in my books.
And he uses his I guess position as an academic and his, I guess, somewhat of a base in like philosophy and psychology and all this kind of stuff. He quotes Jung, and he's quoting this one.
Oh, not only is he's anti-science too. Like, holy fuck.
But he's using this pseudo intellectual speech to prop up his own agenda, which I think is just really, it boils my blood. Like, actually, like that one really long clip that you played, Edward. I was thinking, like, I'm looking back on it now. I'm thinking, you honestly almost couldn't tell the difference between him talking and like fucking Deepak Chopra.
Yeah,
it was just like it was like a word vomit or whatever you call it.
And I just wanted to say something when you said his agenda. It's not his agenda. It's his fucking-ology. He's an ideologue.
Yeah, which he says he hates.
I don't know.
He hates other ideologies, the ones that he doesn't believe.
That he doesn't subscribe to. And this is why I don't think he wants to call them by their pronoun, is because of his ideology. His hate of the left, his hate of SJWs, his hate of atheists. I know he says that he's not a right-winger, but motherfucker, he certainly talks like one.
And even in that video where that student is calling him out, and there's they're being a little unreasonable, but that student actually looks at him and says, "What if someone you personally knew asked you to do it? Would you do it then?" He wouldn't say yes. If I was in order to win hearts and minds, You have to be willing to extend an olive branch. And like agreeing to have a person who's sitting in front of you, and whether or not you believe their condition is X or Y or Z, if they're genuinely asking you as a friend to try to do this, and they're not going to like tar and feather you if you fuck up, like, then you should do it. Otherwise, you're a motherfucker. You're an idiot. You're a complete dick. Like, you know, like, you're not a nice person. But should you go to jail for it? No, but but like, you're still a dick.
But I mean, there's somewhere, like, what I find it's what's going to be untenable in this whole thing, if it's legislated or not, okay, is there's 51 or in some websites 78 different genders, and each of them have their own pronouns.
In Canada, it's 35. That's New York. It's 51 because New York already has a law like ours, where except in New York, obviously, it's all about money, so it's a $250,000 fine.
Yeah, and I mean, how in the hell? And I'm just thinking about logistically. If you're a professor, and this is one of my initial thoughts when I heard him was,
but you still have to prove intent.
I'm just saying though. But if you have 300 people in your class in introductory psychology, and each one there's 31 people in there that have a different gender, and they all want to have a different pronoun. It's mind-boggling to be able to do that. I mean, to keep it straight. And I'm not talking about intent or not. Without offending anybody, it's almost impossible to do. It will be impossible to do. Because 31, you don't, out of that class, you won't remember 31 names. Not alone try to keep up with their gender pronouns. It's just impossible. And I think
I would just stick with, hey, you.
Yeah, and I think,
hey, you.
That's probably the safest bet.
Yeah.
You in the red shirt. Hey, red shirt.
You in the monkey pants.
Yeah, that's right.
I would, and his name would be Professor fucking Fuckface. That's what his name would be. Oh, you're going to cry? You're going to go to the dean because I'm saying something? You don't like my fucking speech?
Listen, I think that we should pass a law outlawing people making fun of monkey pants. I wish you had given me a trigger warning so I could have been in my safe space before.
Here's your trigger podcast. Right there. See that? All right, man. Yeah, so like I'm looking for feedback on this one. You motherfuckers, you never email in. And there's a lot of fucking listeners. So
you can also sorry to interrupt. You can also find us at waywardatheist.com. I guess we have like a little blurb at the end, but
we do, yeah.
You can post a comment on if you go to our website and there's a link to like the actual show episode. There's a comment space there, so please feel free to post comments there, and though everyone can see the comments, and we could start a discussion.
Exactly.
Waywardatheist.com.
Yeah. Like, I really do want feedback. I want to know if you think what we presented tonight is enough to if we've convinced you is really what I want to know. And I want to know if you see any weak points in it as well. And because like I said, I'm planning on doing a YouTube video.
And also, if you found any more clips, I mean, I've been through 50 hours of stuff, and I've only took out small segments to put on the show. I've been through 50 hours with this guy, and I'm telling you, if you find anything that is useful, just send it along. I'll listen to it, I promise.
Yeah. And Terry, where can they find you at?
So I do a blog at analyzeatheist.tumblr.com. I don't really do much there anymore. It's pretty much archived. There's occasional posts. I also have a Facebook page, The Analyzed Atheist, and you can actually find me on another podcast called Reapso Radio. Where we just kind of a free-form hour to 2 hour long podcast where we kind of bullshit, shoot the shit. There is atheism involved to some degree, but we discuss news stories, that sort of thing. So, reapsoradio.com.
And I will say, look forward to me interviewing Big Black Dave and his big black cock. A listener had said that they didn't know anything about us, so we're going to do 3 extra episodes over the next 3 weeks where we're each going to interview each other, and yeah, it should be good.
This was the Wayward Atheist Podcast. Visit our new website at waywardatheists.com. Follow us on Spreaker, spreaker.com/waywardatheists. You can email us at waywardatheistpodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at waywardatheists and on facebook.com/waywardatheists. If you enjoy our content, feel free to leave us a review on iTunes and feel free to support us at patreon.com/waywardatheists.